Good morning, everyone. In last lecture, we have finished with the point that is physiology of hearing, and today we are going to start with the physiology of equilibrium. So, there are two types of equilibrium, that is balance. The first one is static equilibrium, and the second type of equilibrium, it is dynamic type of equilibrium. Okay, so let's see first of all what is static equilibrium. It is maintenance of the position of the body, mainly the head, relative to the force of gravity. So the maculae of atrial and saccule are the sense organ acting for the or which are responsible for the maintenance of static equilibrium. Okay, so we have already seen what is atrial and saccule. So they are present in the vestibular part of the inner ear. The body movements like tilting the head and the linear acceleration or deceleration, it stimulates the receptors which are present in the maculae of the atrial and saccule. Okay, so singular of maculae is macula and maculae is a plural. So let's see what is dynamic equilibrium. So dynamic equilibrium is the maintenance of body position, that is mainly the head, in a response to rotational acceleration or deceleration. Okay, so it is rotational movement. And what is static equilibrium? It is position of body relative to force of gravity. So it is tilting the head and linear acceleration or deceleration. So there is difference between static and the dynamic, that is the it is related to head movement only, but static equilibrium is associated with linear acceleration or deceleration, and the dynamic equilibrium is associated with the rotational acceleration or deceleration. So cristae in the semicircular ducts, they are the main sense organs for the or which are responsible for the dynamic equilibrium. So these cristae of semicircular duct and the maculae of the atrial and saccule, they form the vestibular apparatus. Okay, any change of position of the head which causes movement in the perilymph and endolymph, it bends the hair cells and stimulates sensory receptors in atricles, saccule and ampullae. Okay, so this particular thing, that is movement of fluid in these areas and bending of hairs, it is similar or same as that of the thing that we have studied in the physiology of hearing. So in similar way it will act, but the only difference is that it is associated with the maintenance of equilibrium. Rest of the things, they are same. Okay, so the nerve impulse then pass to the cerebellum through the vestibulocochlear nerve. So the vestibular part of this nerve, it carries or it conducts impulse from the vestibular apparatus to the main area of brain where the sense of equilibrium is perceived, and the cochlear part of the vestibulocochlear nerve is responsible for carrying the impulse from the cochlea of the inner ear to the part of brain where sense of hearing is perceived. Okay, so let's see first of all the organs which are responsible for the maintenance of static equilibrium. So the organs responsible are saccule and atrial. So the walls of both atrial and saccule, they contain a small thickened region called as macula. So two maculae, that is the plural of the word macula, which are perpendicular to one another, are the receptors for the static equilibrium. So this macula acts as receptor for the static equilibrium. So they provide sensory information on the position of head in space, and are essential for maintaining appropriate posture and balance. The maculae also detect linear acceleration and deceleration. The maculae consist of two kinds of cell, that is hair cells, which are the sensory receptors, and supporting cells. So hair cells, they have on their surface 40 to 80 stereocilia, which are actually microvilli of graduated height, plus one kinocilium, a conventional cilium anchored firmly to its basal body and extending beyond the longest stereocilium. So one thing you should remember, that the length of kinocilium is more than stereocilium. Okay, so plural is stereocilia and the singular is stereocilium. Okay, so always remember the as we have said over here, that stereocilia, they are basically the microvilli, and when we compare the cilia with the microvilli, the length of cilia will always be greater than the microvilli. Okay, so similarly in this case kinocilium will be in longer in length as compared to the stereocilium. So you can see from the diagram, over here we have one kinocilium which is very longer in length, and we have multiples of the stereocilia. Okay, so then we have the hair cells. On the top of it, we can see the stereocilia and the kinocilium arising or extruding from its upper surface, and we have the supporting cell. Okay, so this entire part will be nothing but the uh, macula. Okay, so let's see next, that collectively the stereocilia and kinocilium are called as hair bundle. Okay, so this entire thing, it is called as hair bundle. So scattered among the hair cells are columnar supporting cells that probably secrete the thick gelatinous glycoprotein layer, which is called as otolithic membrane. Okay, so what is this otolithic membrane? It is the thick gelatinous glycoprotein layer, and it is secreted by the supporting cells which are present in between the hair cells. Okay, so this otolithic membrane, it rests on the hair cells. Okay, so this you can see, this otolithic membrane, it rests on the these hair bundles. Okay, layer of dense calcium carbonate crystals which are called as otoliths, they extend over entire surface of the otolithic membrane. So these otoliths, which are made up of dense calcium carbonate crystal, they are present on the this otolithic membrane, and the otolithic membrane, it is rested upon the hair bundles of the hair cells. Okay, so now we will see what is this linear acceleration or deceleration, and the tilting position of the head, and how we perceive that we have tilted our head in forward direction, and how we can actually know that how we have tilted our head in backward direction. What is our position of head in the space? Okay, so because the otolithic membrane, it sits on the top of macula, if we tilt our head forward, the otolithic membrane along with the otoliths is pulled by gravity. So you can see, uh, we have moved our head in forward direction. So the otolithic membrane along with the otoliths, they will move in this forward direction also, because the force of gravity, it pulls these otoliths as well as the otolithic membrane in forward direction. So it slides the downhill over the hair cells in the direction of the tilt, bending the hair bundles. So as we have said that these hair bundles onto which otolithic membrane as well as the otoliths they are rested upon. So as this otolithic membrane and the otoliths they move forward, it also will cause the bending of the hair bundles. So, however, if we are sitting upright in a car that suddenly jerks forward, so like braking the car in which the car can jerk forward, the otolithic membrane it lags behind. So, in that kind of jerk, this otolithic membrane it will lag behind. So, it will move in this direction. Okay, so it pulls on the hair bundles. So when it lags behind, it will pull on the hair bundle and it will make them bend in other direction. So in this condition, the hair bundles will be pulled or they will bend in this direction. And in other condition like sitting in car and a sudden jerk, the these hair bundles will be pulled in this direction, in opposite direction of the tilt. Okay, so bending of the hair bundles in one direction, it stretches the tip links. They are present on the surface of the stereocilia. They stretch the tip links which pull open transduction channels, thus producing the depolarizing receptor potentials. Okay, so when we tilt our head in forward direction, what will happen? The tip links of the stereocilium they will make contact with receptor which is present on the surface of the kinocilium, and thus action potential or depolarization will happen in the kinocilium, and then it will be transported through these nerves to the brain. Okay, so that is when we tilt the head in forward direction. But if we as in case of this, as in example of this car, as we move our as our head jerks in backward direction, what will happen? The bending in the opposite direction, it will close the transduction channel. So opposite of this will happen in this case, that is in this case the uh, transduction channel will open up when we tilt our head in forward direction, and in opposite cases the it will close the transduction channels and it will produce the hyperpolarization. Okay, so let's see what is dynamic equilibrium. Okay, so the three semicircular ducts they function in dynamic equilibrium. Okay, so the center portion of the inner ear, that is the vestibuli, it the part of vestibuli that is atrial and sacral, it will work for the static equilibrium, and the semicircular canals which are three in number, they will act or they will function in the dynamic equilibrium. So the ducts lie at right angles to one another in three planes. As I said earlier, they will be arranged in three planes. Okay, so like these three planes, that is x, y, and z axis. Okay, so the two vertical ducts are anterior and posterior semicircular ducts, and the horizontal one is the lateral semicircular duct. So semicircular ducts they can be arranged in three planes, that is anterior, posterior, and lateral plane. Okay, so this positioning it permits detection of rotational acceleration or deceleration. As we can rotate in any directions possible, that's why this arrangement of the semicircular ducts it allows uh, detection of the rotational acceleration and deceleration. In ampulla, we have already seen the structure anatomy of the semicircular canal. So ampulla is the dilated part which is present at the base of these semicircular canals. Okay, So this is the dilated portion of each duct and is a small elevation called as crista. So in ampulla we can find a part that is small elevation called as crista. So you can see the this is elevation in the ampulla. Okay, so this crista contains hair bundle, hair cells, and the supporting cells. So each crista contains group of hair cells and the supporting cells. So the covering the crista is a mass of gelatinous material called as cupula. So similarly, as in case of the static equilibrium, we have seen that on the surface or on the hair cells, we can find the otolithic membrane as well as the otoliths. In this case, in case of dynamic equilibrium, we can find the cupula, which is again a mass of gelatinous material. So you can see there are uh, certain similarities between these, but only the names they differ. Okay, so you can see over here the in detail diagram. So where exactly this ampulla is present, you can see this part is the vestibule, this is cochlea, and these are the semicircular canals arranged in three planes: anterior, posterior, and lateral. And at the base of this semicircular canal, we can find the ampulla, or plural is ampullae. Okay, inside this ampullae we have elevation which is called as crista, which consists of hair bundles, hair cells, and the supporting cells. And onto these hair bundles it is rested the gelatinous mass which is called as cupula. Okay, so let's say what is this dynamic equilibrium. So it detects the rotational movement. So when we move our head, the attached semicircular ducts and hair cells, they also move with it. Okay, so endolymph which is present within the ampulla is not attached and it lags behind. Okay, so as moving moving hair cells, it drag along the stationary endolymph, the hair bundles bend. So as we move our head in any of the direction, the endolymph it lags behind and it causes a movement of the cupula. Okay, and as cupula moves in a certain direction, it will cause the bending of hair cells onto which this cupula is rested. Okay, so this bending of hair bundles, it will produce the receptor potentials or the action potential in the nerves which are innervating these hair cells. So in turn these receptor potentials then they lead to the nerve impulses that pass along the vestibular branch of the vestibulocochlear nerve. Okay, so next point is the equilibrium pathways. That means once the receptor potential is generated into the hair cells, how it is then transferred or how it reaches to the parts of brain where it is actually perceived. Okay, so we have similarly seen in case of the hearing pathways. Now we will see the equilibrium pathways. So bending of the hair bundles of the hair cells in the semicircular ducts, atricles or saccule, they cause release of neurotransmitter, which is probably glutamate. And this released neurotransmitter, it causes or it generates nerve impulses in the sensory neurons which innervate the hair cells. The cell bodies of the sensory neurons, they are located in the vestibular ganglia. Okay, so there it was the cochlear ganglia, but as the sensory neuron, they are innervating the vestibular apparatus of the inner ear, their cell body they lie in the vestibular ganglia. So the nerve impulses pass along the axons of these neurons, which form vestibular branch of the vestibulocochlear nerve. Okay, so the axons, they combine of these all sensory neurons, they form the vestibular part of the vestibulocochlear nerve, which is the cranial nerve, eighth cranial nerve. Okay, so most of these axons, they synapse with sensory neurons in vestibular nuclei, the major integrating center for equilibrium, which is present in the medulla oblongata. So this vestibular nerve, it then reaches to the central nervous system, and the first stop it takes is in the medulla oblongata, and the name of the stop is the vestibular nuclei. Okay, and also the second part in which you can find this vestibular nuclei is in pons. Okay, so vestibular nuclei, it also receives input from the eyes and the proprioceptors. Proprioceptors, these are the type of receptors present in the skeletal muscle which detect the position of the hands in space. That means if we elevate our hand, then we will know that our hand is elevated. Okay, how we know that? Because of these proprioceptors which are present in the skeletal muscle, which detect our position of our hand in the space. Okay, so especially the proprioceptors in the neck and limb muscles, which indicate the position of the head and the limbs. Okay, so remaining axons, they enter cerebellum through the inferior cerebellar peduncles. Okay, so first of all, let's revise these sensory neurons. They reach vestibular nucleus in the medulla oblongata as well as pons, and also these vestibular nuclei, it receives input from two regions, that is from eyes and the proprioceptors of the limb and the uh, muscles of the neck. Okay, and also remaining of the axons, which don't synapse in the vestibular nuclei, they enter cerebellum through the inferior cerebellar peduncles. Okay, so the vestibular nuclei, it integrate information from vestibular, visual and somatic receptor, and then sends command to, so vestibular, so this vestibular part is related to the inner ear. The visual, it is carrying sensory impulses from the visual field, that is the eyes, and the somatic receptors, they carry impulses from the somatic receptor present in skeletal muscle, and then they send command to four regions, that is first one is nuclei of cranial nerves, that is oculomotor, trochlear and abducens nerve, which control coupled movements of the eyes with those of the head to help maintain focus on the visual field. That means whenever we rotate our head in one direction, that is consider that if we are rotating our head to our right, then our eyes also move in this direction. This happens because of the command sent to the oculomotor, trochlear and abducens nerve. Okay, then second location to which commands are being sent, that is nuclei of accessory nerves. So what it does, or it helps control head and neck movements, which assist in maintaining equilibrium. So these accessory nerves, they help control head and neck movements to assist in maintaining equilibrium. Okay, so then third location to which the commands are being sent, that is the first one is vestibulospinal tract. Okay, so this impulses down the spinal cord to maintain muscle tone in skeletal muscle to help maintain equilibrium. Okay, so next, sorry, Next location is the ventral posterior nucleus, which is present in thalamus, and then to the vestibular area in the parietal lobe of the cerebral cortex, which is part of primary somatosensory area, to provide us with the conscious awareness of the position and movements of the heads and limbs. Okay, so please see the location vestibular area where it is present. It is present in the parietal lobe. Okay, so and what it allows, it provides us with the conscious awareness of the position and movements of the heads and limbs. Okay, so this is the, you can see the uh, pathway, equilibrium pathway, and you can see the accessory nerve nucleus to which the commands are being sent. Then abducen nerve motor nucleus, you can see over here, the trochlear nerve motor nucleus over here, ocular nerve motor nucleus over here. Then we have vestibular area in the cerebral cortex in here, that is the parietal lobe, and the ventral posterior nucleus which is present in the thalamus. Then we can see the vestibular nuclei which is present in the pons as well as in the medulla oblongata. Okay, so disorders of ear, we are going to see only two disorders of ear. That is, first is Meniere's disease and second one is the otitis media. So let's see what is Meniere's disease. So it results from an increased amount of endolymph which enlarges membranous labyrinth. So among the symptoms are the fluctuating hearing loss, which is caused by distortion of the basilar membrane of cochlea, and roaring tinnitus. Tinnitus is ringing sound in the ear. The spinning or whirling vertigo, that is dizziness, is also characteristic of Meniere's disease. Okay, so almost total destruction of hearing, it may occur over a period of years. So this Meniere's disease, it is associated with hearing loss if not treated at earlier years. Okay, so the next second is otitis media. So this otitis media is an acute infection of middle ear which is caused mainly by bacteria and is associated with infections of nose and throat. Okay, so as we have already seen, in case of anatomy of middle ear is connected with the uh, with the throat, that is the pharynx, by means of the eustachian tube or auditory external auditory canal. Okay, so if we get infections of nose and throat, by means of this eustachian tube, this bacteria can enter into the middle ear, and once they enter into the middle ear, they can cause the infection of middle ear, which is called as otitis media. So the symptoms of this otitis media, they include pain, malaise, fever, and reddening, outward bulging of the eardrum, which may rupture unless prompt treatment is not received. Okay, so this may involve draining pus from the middle ear. So sometimes it may happen that pus may get formed in the middle ear and that will come out of the middle ear through the ruptured eardrum. So the bacteria passing into the auditory tube from the nasopharynx are the primary cause of middle ear infections. Okay, so children are more susceptible than the adults to the otitis media because their auditory tubes, they are almost horizontal, which decreases the drainage. Okay, so if otitis media occurs frequently, surgical procedure which is called as tympanotomy is often employed. This surgery It consists of insertion of small tube into eardrum to provide a pathway for the drainage of fluid from the middle ear. Okay, so that's all with the presentation on the sense of equilibrium and hearing. Thank you.